All right, let's get right into it. Today we are tackling a huge problem that I think pretty much everyone is dealing with right now. We're calling it the information delusion, and we're going to get to the bottom of why your brain feels so constantly, hopelessly clogged.
So let's just start with a question that might honestly shake up a belief you've had your entire life. We're always told, right, that curiosity is this amazing, essential virtue. But what if that's not the whole story anymore? What if, in our modern world of just infinite noise, your curiosity has actually become a huge liability?
That idea, that curiosity, can be a bad thing, brings us straight to our first section. We're going to identify what this analysis calls your most expensive bug.
Okay, so let's think about your brain for a second. Imagine it's a super sophisticated computer, your own personal neuro OS. It's incredibly powerful, no doubt. But, just like any operating system, it can have bugs. And the argument here is that there is a massive, hidden, and really costly bug running in the background for most of us. And that bug, it's got a name: information hoarding. This is the delusion, and it's everywhere, that just cramming more data into your head somehow magically equals more wisdom. We've totally tricked ourselves into believing that a full brain is a smart brain. And the symptoms of this, well, they're things we do every single day. I mean, think about it. Your inbox is probably overflowing with newsletters you swear you'll get to someday, right? Or that podcast queue that just seems to grow all by itself. And, of course, that hypnotic, endless scroll through social media. These aren't just little habits, they're symptoms of the bug. So if this stuff is so common, what's the real problem? What's the actual harm? Well, that leads us right into our next section, where we're going to dismantle the lie about learning.
And the analysis here does not pull any punches. For anyone who's actually trying to achieve something, to operate at a high level, this habit isn't just a small flaw. It's described as a catastrophic failure of high-performance psychology. That's a big deal.
So here's the absolute gut punch. All that frantic consumption, it's not actually learning. It's more like pouring gunk into a high-performance engine. You are literally just clogging your own neural processor, which makes it slower and way less effective.
But why does this happen? How does it work? Well, there's a really powerful scientific concept that explains this mental traffic jam perfectly. It's something called the entropy trap.
The explanation actually comes from a field called systems thinking. And what's cool about this is that it doesn't just look at tiny little parts in isolation. It studies how the entire system works together. And it has a shockingly clear explanation for the damage that information hoarding is doing to our mental system. And this gets us to a core principle. When you flood a system, and your brain is a system, with more and more low-quality inputs, with just noise, you don't just get a little bit more disorder. No, you get an exponential increase in chaos in what's called system entropy. So to put it simply, the more noise you pump in, the more chaos you create inside your own head. It's a runaway effect.
And the end result of all this internal chaos? You get paralyzed. You've taken in so much contradictory, low-quality data that you just can't make a decision. You can't form a clear thought or take any meaningful action. And this is identified as the #1 reason for cognitive stagnation. You know that awful feeling of being mentally stuck in the mud? This is why.
So this whole situation forces us to make a choice. It really boils down to one of two very different identities. Are you a data dumpster, or are you a strategic architect?
Let's break this down, because you really need to ask yourself which one of these sounds more like you. On one side, you've got the data dumpster. They're just a passive information consumer. They think their random, unfocused curiosity is a strength. They feel really informed, but the truth is, they're paralyzed. Then you have the strategic architect. They're a selective ignorant. They get it. They know raw, uncurated curiosity is a liability, and instead they focus on mastering a system to find the signal in all that noise. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. It's the core delusion of the data dumpster. That feeling of being informed, it's an illusion. The reality is paralysis, caused by the sheer weight of all the junk data you've let into your brain.
So how do we make the switch? How do we stop being a dumpster and start being an architect? Well, that brings us to the final, and I think the most powerful section of this whole breakdown, the power of ignoring.
This right here is the radical shift in mindset you need to make. The path to real wisdom, to real clarity. It's not about cramming more information in. It's about becoming ruthlessly, strategically good at ignoring almost everything. It's a process of subtraction, not addition.
So, the path to becoming an architect is laid out in 4 pretty clear steps. First, you just have to be honest with yourself and actually diagnose your own hoarding habits. Second, you have to consciously reject that myth that all curiosity is good. It's not. Third, you have to actively embrace selective ignorance as your main strategy. And finally, you build and master your own signal finder protocol, your personal system for finding what's vital and just throwing away the rest. And that leaves us with one last unavoidable question. Now that you can see these 2 paths so clearly laid out, the choice is completely yours. Are you going to keep being a passive data dumpster, feeling informed but staying paralyzed? Or are you going to take active control, clear out all the noise, and become a strategic architect of your own mind? Let's talk about focus. That feeling of being totally overwhelmed, scattered, unable to get anything meaningful done? We tend to think it's some kind of personal failing. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a technical problem? A signal-to-noise failure in your own mind? Today, we're going to diagnose that problem, and we're going to fix it.
This right here is the whole game. You need to let this sink in. It's not about your willpower, it's not about discipline. The real issue is the sheer volume of junk data you're feeding your brain every single day. You're not broken, your input channels are just completely flooded. So, to fix this, we have to start thinking like engineers. Just imagine for a second that your mind is a computer, and it's running on a very special piece of software, your neural OS. This is the operating system that processes reality for you, connects the dots, and helps you make decisions. And just like any OS, it can get buggy, it can slow down, and most importantly, it can be upgraded.
All right, so let's pop the hood and run some diagnostics. We need to find the single most expensive bug that's currently running on your system. You know, the one that's causing all those crashes and all that slowdown.
And there it is, the information hoarding bug. It's this sneaky, mistaken belief we all have that just consuming more articles, more podcasts, more opinions is going to magically lead to more wisdom. But honestly, it's a catastrophic error in our programming.
And this is what that hoarding looks like in the real world. I mean, does this look familiar to anyone? Each one of these things seems fine on its own, right? Maybe even productive. But when you put them all together, they create this absolute tidal wave of noise that just completely clogs up your mental processor.
So, what's the actual price we pay for letting this bug run wild? Well, it's not just about feeling a little distracted. We're talking about a systemic breakdown of your entire cognitive machine.
So here's what's really going on inside your head. Every useless piece of info you consume, every bit of celebrity gossip, every political hot take, it acts like a cognitive parasite. It's not just sitting there, it's actively eating up your mental RAM. That's the precious processing power you need for deep work, for creativity, for solving actual problems.
This slide just lays it out perfectly. We all operate on this myth. More data in equals more wisdom out. But the reality, according to systems thinking, is that more low-quality data doesn't just add a little noise. It exponentially increases the chaos, the entropy inside your head. And the direct result of all that chaos is something called processing drag. You know that feeling, right? When you're busy all day, but you have nothing to show for it? That's your neural OS spending almost all of its energy just trying to sort through junk, with almost nothing left over for the high-level thinking that actually moves the needle.
Now this one can be tough to hear. We're always told that curiosity is a superpower. And it can be. But in today's world, curiosity without a strong filter is a massive liability. It's like leaving the front door of your mind wide open for all those cognitive parasites to just waltz right in.
And if you let that processing drag go on for too long, it compounds into something way, way worse. A total systemic fog.
And it's a predictable 3-step downward spiral. First, your system hits neural overload from all the junk. Then, as you're struggling to keep up, your own thoughts get drowned out by the noise of everyone else's opinions. And finally, you hit cognitive stagnation. You feel like you know a lot, but you're so overwhelmed by conflicting data that you're just paralyzed, unable to act. I mean, just think about this metaphor. You have a world-class high-performance engine in your skull, capable of doing amazing things, but you're pouring garbage fuel into it. You're trying to run it on social media static and low-quality opinions. It's no wonder the engine is sputtering.
And here is the absolute most important point. This damage isn't always temporary. If you run a high-performance engine on bad fuel for long enough, you're going to cause permanent damage. The risk here is a long-term, maybe even irreversible crash of your mind's ability to think clearly and deeply.
Okay, that's the problem. It's a big one, I get it. But now we pivot. Now we talk about the solution. It's time to install a software patch for your brain. It's time to embrace a whole new protocol.
Because that's the real goal, isn't it? Buried somewhere deep inside all that noise are these golden threads of actual signal, of real opportunity. The question is, how on earth do you find them when everyone else is just drowning in static? You install the Signal Finder. Now, this isn't an app, it's a mental model. It's a ruthless filtering protocol that you run on every single piece of information that tries to get into your brain. It asks one simple question: is this signal or is this noise?
And doing this, well, it requires a fundamental shift in your identity. You have to give up on trying to know everything. Instead, you have to become a selective ignorant. You have to start taking pride in the huge amounts of information you consciously choose to ignore. That's how you free up the bandwidth to focus on what truly matters.
So this brings us to the final transformation. This is where we go from being a passive victim of information overload to being a strategic architect of our own focus and reality.
Look at this. This is the choice, right here, right now. On the left, you've got the data dumpster, constantly consuming, always clogged, totally paralyzed. And on the right, you have the strategic architect, a selective ignorant who is focused, effective, and actively building their life by controlling what they let in.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Upgrading your neural OS isn't about what new thing you're going to add to your life. It starts with an act of subtraction. It starts with deletion. So the real question is, what information will you bravely and strategically choose to ignore, starting today?
All right, let's talk about a serious upgrade for your mind. Today, we're going to break down the protocol that separates the people who just passively consume information from those who become the strategic architects of their own thinking. Let's dive in. So let's start with a quote that really challenges a core belief. Just think of your mind as a kind of neural OS, the operating system running your thoughts. Well, this points out its most expensive bug, the idea that just hoarding more and more information somehow makes you wiser. It's such an easy trap to fall into, right? We all assume that if we just read one more newsletter or listen to one more podcast, we're getting smarter. But when you look at it through the lens of high-performance psychology, how elite thinkers really operate, that assumption isn't just a tiny mistake. It's a full-blown system failure that is actively holding you back. So let's put a name on this bug. We're calling it the information hoarding delusion. It's that subconscious drive to just keep accumulating data without any real purpose. And honestly, it's time we took a closer look at it. I mean, the sources are everywhere, and they just don't stop. Your inbox, your podcast app, your social media feeds, it's a constant, overwhelming flood of data. And sure, each one promises to give you some kind of value, but altogether, they just create a massive deluge of noise. But here's the thing. This noise isn't harmless. It has a real, tangible cost to your cognitive performance. So what's the actual price we're paying for this constant flood of information? This brings us to a really powerful concept from systems thinking called information entropy. The principle is actually pretty simple. When you flood any system, and especially your brain, with a ton of low-quality random stuff, the result isn't clarity. It's chaos. It's disorder that leads to total paralysis. It basically confirms that the quality of your thinking is always determined by the purity of what you let in.
Think of it this way. Every single piece of irrelevant information you consume is like a junk file on a computer. You feel like you're learning, like you're upgrading your knowledge, but what's really happening? You're just clogging the processor and slowing the whole system down.
And this is the really tricky part. You feel informed, right? You can talk about a dozen different headlines from the day, but when it's time to make a clear decision or think about something deeply, you're just stuck. You're paralyzed by a mountain of conflicting data. That's cognitive stagnation. We're always told that curiosity is a good thing. And, it is. But in our age of absolutely infinite noise, an uncurated curiosity, one that just wanders everywhere, actually becomes a systemic liability. It's like an open back door that lets all the noise come in and hijack your attention. So how do we fix this? How do we debug our own system? Well, we need an upgrade to our neural OS. And this solution is called the Signal Finder protocol. This really gets to the heart of the identity shift you have to make. You've got to evolve from being a data dumpster, just passively collecting stuff, into a strategic architect, who deliberately designs their own mental space. This means you stop aimlessly data drifting, and you begin a process of targeted acquisition. You're no longer just a consumer. You learn to be selectively ignorant. The core idea here is completely counterintuitive. It's not about getting more. It's about a strategic less. When your inputs are fewer, but they're way higher in quality and relevance, your thinking becomes incredibly precise and effective. In other words, less noise makes for a much more lethal signal. Okay, so the big question is, how do we actually practice this? Well, it all starts with mastering what we call the art of selective ignorance.
Selective ignorance isn't about being uninformed. Not at all. It's about being strategically uninformed. It's a ruthless filtering process. If a piece of data doesn't serve your core goals, what we call your first principles, the fundamental truths you're building everything on, you don't just ignore it. You actively delete it from your system.
So how much should you be deleting? Well, about 99% of what's out there. Seriously. The vast majority of breaking news and trending topics, they aren't signals. They're just systemic distractions that have been engineered specifically to steal your mental bandwidth. This gives us a new, simple 3-step intake process. First, you have to get crystal clear on what truly matters, your first principles. Second, you filter all incoming data through that lens. And third, you have to be absolutely ruthless in deleting whatever doesn't make the cut. When you really master this process, you achieve a state that very few people ever experience. You become the architect of silence. The ultimate goal here isn't just to be more productive. It's to create what we call neural silence. That's the mental quiet space where true insight and deep, complex systems thinking can actually happen. Let's be real. You can't hear the signal if the noise around you is deafening. By doing this, you're basically aligning your mental operating system with a powerful intellectual law known as the principle of parsimony, or Occam's razor. It's the simple but profound idea that the clearest, most effective path forward is usually the one with the fewest unnecessary parts. And this is what you're aiming for. This is the end state. Your cognitive input starts to look like this chart. The noise is minimized, it's almost flatlined. But the signal? The signal becomes exceptionally clear and incredibly strong. This is the very definition of operating with a high signal-to-noise ratio. When you get to this state, your whole way of thinking transforms. It's no longer this fuzzy, reactive process. It becomes a form of calculation. It's precise, it's deliberate, it's powerful. Just like a master architect designing a flawless structure, protected by the silence that you've built. So, we'll leave you with this question. Take a hard look at your own mental process. In the architecture of your mind, who is really in control? Is it the constant chaotic noise from the outside world, or is it the focused, deliberate architect within? The choice ultimately is yours. Welcome back to Unordinary Mind. Look, in a world of infinite noise, the one skill that sets you apart is the ability to find a clear signal. Today, we're diving into a system that's all about mastering high-performance psychology by tackling the one thing that's jamming up our mental processors more than anything else: information overload. It is time to learn how to delete the noise. All right, let's just jump right in with a quote that might, sting a little. We've all been taught that curiosity is this amazing virtue, right? Something you should just let run wild. But what if that's completely wrong for the world we live in now? What if your unchecked, uncurated curiosity isn't a strength at all, but a massive liability that literally grinds your thinking to a halt? So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to diagnose the core problem, what I call the information hoarding delusion, and what it's doing to your brain's operating system. Then we get to the good stuff, the solution, a simple 3-step filtering protocol that's designed to flip you from being a passive consumer into a strategic architect of your own mind. Okay, let's get to the root of it. I want you to think of your mind as a high-performance operating system, a supercomputer. Well, this whole information hoarding thing, it's the most expensive, most damaging bug you could possibly have running on that system. And here is that bug in action. It's this deep-seated belief that if you just consume more stuff, more newsletters, more podcasts, more feeds, you'll magically get wiser. But that is a catastrophic mistake. When you just crank up the volume of low-quality junk, you don't get smarter. You just create a ton of static and chaos inside your own head. And that static leads us directly to the consequences. And let me be clear, this isn't some harmless little habit. It has a real heavy cost. It creates this state of constant mental clutter, which we can call information entropy. So let's be super clear about this. When you're just endlessly scrolling and consuming, you are not learning. You are clogging your processor. You might feel productive, you might feel informed, but in reality, you're just paralyzing yourself with a fire hose of contradictory, low-signal junk. This state, this information entropy, is the #1 reason for cognitive stagnation. So this slide really presents you with a fundamental choice. It's about your identity. On one side, you've got the information consumer, basically a reactive data dumpster who feels paralyzed and totally clogged up. And on the other side, the strategic architect. This person is a proactive signal finder. They're selective, they're focused, they're in control. To get out of that entropy trap, you have to consciously choose to be the architect. So how do we actually make that shift? Not with more willpower. Trying harder is a losing game. You do it with a system. You need a protocol, a clear, repeatable process that does the heavy lifting for you, helping you find that signal in all the noise. And this filtering protocol is built on 3 really simple but powerful steps. First, we cut off the noise at the source. Get ruthless. Second, we totally change when and why we consume information. And third, we actually create the space for our minds to process what really matters. All right, step 1, source decimation. This is all about a huge mindset shift. Your attention is your most valuable non-renewable resource, period. You have to stop giving it away for free and start treating it like a high-cost capital investment. And here it is. This is the simple, brutal question for your audit. Go through every single information stream, every newsletter, podcast, social account, and ask this one question. If the answer is no, you delete it immediately. No exceptions. It's a ruthless audit because you have to be ruthless to protect your most valuable asset. So once you've cleaned house and decimated your sources, the next step is managing what's left. Step 2 is all about killing that destructive habit of just-in-case learning. You know what I'm talking about, hoarding articles and saving podcasts, thinking, oh, I might need this one day. That has to stop. The just-in-time rule forces you to make this critical distinction. Is what you're consuming execution data, information you absolutely need for your main goal in the next 90 days? Or is it entertainment data? Everything else that just feels productive but is really just a distraction. Your whole system has to be geared towards prioritizing execution data. And finally, we get to the most important step, the one that actually turns information into wisdom, systemic synthesis. Because look, capturing a clear signal is great, but it's totally useless if you don't give your brain the time and space to process it, to connect the dots, and to come up with something new. And the method for this sounds almost too simple. 1 hour, every single day, of input 0. No podcasts, no articles, no screens, nothing. Just you and your thoughts. Go for a walk, journal, stare at a wall, I don't care. This is when your high bandwidth mind does its real work, weaving together all those signals you so carefully collected. This really is the core message of this entire idea. Your mind is an incredibly powerful processor. It's designed for deep, creative thinking, but the modern world basically encourages us to treat it like a garbage disposal for junk data. You have to consciously decide to stop doing that. So the takeaway here is crystal clear. The path to high performance isn't about consuming more. It's about architecting a better system for your mind. If you are ready to delete the noise and finally find the signal, make sure you subscribe to Unordinary Mind and comment signal down below. We'll send you our information filtering audit for free to get you started. It's time. Stop consuming, start architecting. And that brings us to the final and really the only question that matters. After seeing all this, which identity are you going to choose? Are you going to keep being a passive consumer, a data dumpster drowning in noise? Or are you going to become a strategic architect, deliberately building your reality from only the purest signal? The choice is yours.